The most usual time to see bombastic layouts, especially in Western monthly superhero comics, is in the action scenes. There's always a balance of legibility in these scenes though, while still wanting to create page layouts that are as big and explosive as the fights that contain them. Joe Bennett, artist on the excellent Immortal Hulk series, has a really clever approach that takes his normal, fairly structured page layouts and adopts them for the action scenes in an interesting way. You're watching Strip Panel Naked, I'm Hass, and I'm going to show you some of the cool stuff lurking in the pages of some of the best comics. Before we get right into it, if you're a fan of the Immortal Hulk series, it was the feature book in issue 15 of the Eisner-nominated Panel by Panel magazine that I edit, including a big interview with Al Ewing and the rest of the creative team, such as Joe Bennett, on the creation of the series. So definitely grab that issue if you want to read more about the comic, and also get to see some of Joe Bennett's layouts and some of his rough drawings and that sort of thing. Okay, so before we get into those bombastic layouts, we should probably start by establishing how Bennett approaches the more normal pages. So here's a pretty standard one from the first issue with a back and forth between characters. And Bennett likes the grid, and Ewing likes writing about 6 panels on the page generally. So you can see every panel is the same size, pretty structured, a pretty standard approach to a normal 6-panel grid. And a lot of Bennett's regular pages of the story fit like this. So here's another example. It's less formally structured than the previous 6-panel grid was, but here you can see how there is still a pretty rigid approach to laying out the pages. There's the feature panel you often see, the top one in this case, working as the establishing shot. Then you've got a tier with a long panel, but it sits structured above the 3 panels, the same width. Nothing kind of breaks a panel edge, nothing's in a regular panel shape, nothing seems out of place. Even when you get moments that might feel like they would require it, like Bennett drawing Banner turning into the Hulk in the past, the page is still really structured. It's kind of a reserved approach that wants to hold something back, specifically so it can unleash it at a later date for a larger impact. It does manage its way out in small ways though, as a page of Banner in a diner shows you. It's a standard 6-panel grid, as we've seen with these other pages, but with a long tier bottom panel that takes up 2 panels worth of space. Still, that wouldn't be anything out of the ordinary. But the 4th panel is really interesting, where Banner sees a reflection of Hulk in the fork, a reminder of the thing he's holding at bay in his body, and the panel therefore extends out beyond its boundaries. It's taking up more room than it should, and the orderly approach to paneling really means it draws attention to itself on the page. Hulk is big, he's bad, but at least for now he's contained within panel borders and within Banner himself. So Bennett shows he's using the panel structuring as a way to add something to the story. When Banner is in control of the Hulk, for the most part, the world is pretty orderly and structured. It's when Hulk breaks out that things start to shift and change, and it shows why that reserved approach is being done, because it allows Bennett to have some flexibility when it comes to these big action moments. We'll work up to that though, because the language isn't quite as simple as just having bold panel layouts when Hulk turns up and fights, because Bennett also keeps things pretty structured when Hulk fights Sasquatch in the 5th issue. If you look at this page, for example, early on in the fight, the paneling is still rigidly there. Even though there's this big punch impact in the first panel, it's still pretty straightforward in that it's presented exactly the same way that the establishing shot of the bar was in that other example. In fact, if you place those 2 images next to each other, you can see that they're more or less the same layout. So Bennett is using the same approach to these 2 giants fighting each other as he is to this dialogue scene in the bar. It does change, however, when Sasquatch takes over the fight and starts to make Hulk extra angry. On this page you can see the transition perfectly. Again, the majority of the page structure is the same, and it's a normal approach, but the final 2 panels show what I wanted to focus on with Bennett's action pages. There's 2 major differences, the first being how the panels start to kind of tilt away from the page, and I'll talk a bit more about that in the next examples too. And the second thing is that they suddenly feel almost removed from the page, because they get these white gutters around them, which the rest of the series often eschews in favour of black pages and gutters. So to me, they feel removed from the page, almost like those 2 panels have kind of been cut out of the image and placed over the top. You can see that they're layered, which normally doesn't happen. So this is kind of like 3-dimensional depth added to the otherwise flat page. And that only gets more and more intense when you see a full page drawn like this. Here's one later in the fight, and Bennett gives them all the same attributes as we've just seen, wrapped in white, which seems to lift them off the blackness of the page itself, and thrown all around the page. They do, however, still have structure to them. And that seems to be the major thing for Bennett's approach. If you look at these panels and you kind of rearrange them in your mind so they weren't sliding all over the place, you'd find that the normal 6-panel grid is still there. But what he's doing is it's like he's taking those individual panels and just sort of shaking them around on the page. Here's one that puts that into interesting context. You've got a normal page of people conversing around the center panel, which is an intense action panel with a blast hitting Hulk. So the regular moments sit in the structure, and the space for that middle panel sits there too, but it's been given that white border and lifted over the other images, slightly tilted. It's a shorthand for a major blast or, a major impact moment, and yet it still technically fits within the boundaries of the approach and world that Bennett has created in this book. I think there's a feeling that Bennett is drawing pages in the way the world works for him in comics. There's an organization and structure to everything, a normalcy, but it's able to be extended and broken by creatures that are larger than life. When the reflection of Hulk stares back at Banner from the fork, the panel extends to show how this creature is larger than the world he accommodates. When we see him pick up Stark and smack Black Panther with the Iron Man armor, Bennett acknowledges that this moment is larger than life, and so it should extend beyond the page. This interesting three-dimensional effect being created as the panel borders lift off the page, and Hulk and the characters extend over the panel borders further, like they're reaching out of the page. It's a great piece of work that shows how action can be both structured and extravagant, while keeping within the same language of the rest of the book. There's a lot to love in Immortal Hulk by Al Ewing, Joe Bennett and the team, but a big part of why this book works is Bennett's ability to infuse the very way he creates pages and layouts in the book with elements of story and inference. It's refined and very, very beautiful. Thanks for watching. Strip Panel Naked continues to exist regularly because of the amazing support from the patrons, who get access to years worth of exclusive extra writing and content. And I love your support too. You can find me on Twitter as well at HassanOE, and the Eisner nominated magazine I edit at PanelxPanel.com. As always, hit subscribe and that notification bell to keep up to date with all the new episodes, and I'll see you next time.